Let's talk about weapons. If you walked into this movie expecting a straightforward sequel to Barbarian, you walked out either completely bewildered or convinced you'd just seen a masterpiece. Or if you're like me, probably a bit of both. This film, it's what critics are calling a spiritual successor, a confident as hell refinement of the form. He took the chaotic, unpredictable energy of Barbarian, cranked the ambition up to 11 and dropped a film that feels like a full-blown cinematic event. The setup is deceptively simple and deeply unsettling. In the small traumatized town of Maybrook, a month before our story even begins, something impossible happened. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 17 middle school children simultaneously got out of bed, walked out of their homes, and vanished into the night. No witnesses, no ransom notes, no explanation, just gone. The film picks up in the aftermath, throwing us into a community drowning in grief, paranoia, and a desperate clawing need for answers. We follow the parents, the teachers, and the investigators as they try to piece together an event that defies all logic. And what starts as a grounded, atmospheric thriller eventually takes a hard left turn into something far stranger, far more complex, and infinitely more terrifying. But to really understand the impact of this film, we have to go behind the scenes, because the story of how weapons got made is almost as wild as the movie itself. After Barbarian became a word-of-mouth sensation, every executive in Hollywood was asking the same question: what is Zach Cregger doing next? He had become, overnight, one of the most exciting new voices in horror, so when his script for Weapons hit the market, it ignited a firestorm. I'm talking about a seismic bidding war that shook the foundations of the industry. It was a feeding frenzy. Every major player wanted a piece of the next big thing in horror, and the showdown came down to New Line Cinema and a joint bid from Universal and Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions. And when New Line won, the fallout was insane. Peele, the guy who basically defined the modern horror renaissance with Get Out, was so monumentally pissed off at losing the script that he reportedly severed ties with his own management. You have to understand how crazy that is. This was something so special and so valuable that losing it was seen as a catastrophic failure. It was a signal to the entire industry that Weapons was a property worth going to war over. It cemented the idea that in a town obsessed with safe bets and established IPs, an original horror script from a visionary filmmaker was now the most valuable commodity of all. The production itself wasn't exactly smooth sailing either. The film got caught in the crossfire of the industry-wide strikes, forcing some major casting shakeups. Pedro Pascal was originally set to star but had to drop out, with Josh Brolin stepping in to take his place. But this turmoil did nothing to slow the film down. With a modest budget of just $38 million, practically pocket change for a major studio release these days, Weapons went on to gross over $260 million worldwide. Think about that. An original R-rated horror film with a complex, non-linear narrative and heavy thematic undertones crushed the box office. This is the kind of rare success story that forces Hollywood to rethink its entire playbook. It's proof that audiences are not only willing, but eager to show up for something new, something challenging, as long as it's executed with confidence and vision. And man, does this film have vision. Cregger has said in interviews that the script was born from a place of intense personal grief, written after the sudden death of his close friend and Whitest Kids You Know co-star Trevor Moore. He described the writing process as an introverted diary-like exercise, a way to channel his own chaotic emotions into a narrative, and you feel that raw, unfiltered pain in every frame of this film. Josh Brolin revealed that Cregger based every single major character on a specific stage or reaction he personally experienced while grieving. The anger, the denial, the obsessive need for answers, the paralyzing despair, it's all there woven into the DNA of the characters. It's a blistering, sharply aimed critique of how our society responds to tragedy. The title itself, Weapons, is a clue. As Cregger puts it, it's about how people weaponize everything when they're at their lowest. The film relentlessly dissects the destructive sensationalism and the obsessive hunt for a motive that follows every senseless act of violence. Everyone is desperate to understand why it happened, because if they can find a reason, they can pretend it won't happen again. But this desperate search for a simple answer paralyzes any real progress, leaving the actual victims, the children, to suffer in the fallout. Cregger doesn't pull any punches with his metaphors either. The central mystery is steeped in allusions to the American gun violence epidemic. The number 217, the time the children disappear, is a direct and chilling reference. It echoes the Parkland shooting where 17 people were killed in the second month of the year. It's also the exact number of congressional votes that recently blocked a federal ban on assault weapons. In one of the film's most haunting nightmare sequences, we see see a vision of an AR-15 rifle just floating ominously above a suburban home. It's a symbol as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face, and it's meant to be. This isn't a film that's interested in being coy about its message, and for the hardcore horror nerds, Cregger also confirmed that 217 is a nod to the infamous room number in Stephen King's The Shining. But the social commentary runs even deeper. The film's supernatural entity, a creature named Gladys, is a terrifying metaphor for addiction. Cregger, who grew up with an alcoholic father, depicts this force not as a monster, but as a parasite. It latches onto its hosts, slowly siphoning their life force, turning them into hollowed out zombie shells of their former self. Driven by a singular destructive need. It's a powerful and deeply personal examination of how addiction consumes not just the individual, but everyone around them. What makes all of this work? What stops the film from becoming a preachy, heavy-handed lecture? Is Cregger's incredible command of narrative structure. He takes massive risks. The film is structured like a Rashomon-esque tapestry, broken into 6 distinct segments, each from a different character's point of view. As Zach told in one of the interviews, he was a fan of 2 beloved movies, Magnolia by Paul Thomas Anderson and Pulp Fiction, so it was his intention to make something non-linear himself. Movies feel like a narrative puzzle box, constantly teasing you with little nuggets of information before abruptly cutting away, only to replay the same events from a completely different perspective. One minute, you're in a tense paranoid thriller that feels like Denis Villeneuve Prisoners. The next, you're in a scene of absurdist, macabre humor that feels completely unhinged. This structure keeps you permanently off balance, desperately trying to connect the dots as the full horrifying picture slowly comes into focus. It's a bold, ambitious approach that you just don't see in mainstream Hollywood filmmaking, and it's a testament to Cregger's confidence as a storyteller. Second thing that stands out with this movie is a perfect balance between horror moments and comedy. Some heroes of the story, especially roles played by Austin Abrams and Alden Ehrenreich, definitely are the comic reliefs of the whole movie. Believe me, almost every scene with both of them is comedy gold. It's funny as hell. And just to keep balance safe, those moments of funny comedy constantly shift to scary ones. That's a very impressive director's achievement when you're capable of managing that amount of emotional and thrilling roller coaster without tearing the movie apart. Ultimately, Weapons is the film that solidifies Zach Cregger's status as one of the most vital and genre-bending filmmakers working today. He's successfully avoided the sophomore slump, delivering a movie that is a smarter, scarier, and more emotionally resonant than his already impressive debut. This is the second major step from an artist who is clearly just getting started, and in a Hollywood landscape that feels increasingly devoid of new ideas, it makes it essential. So to truly grasp why Weapons hit Hollywood with the force of a tectonic plate shift, we need to look at the earthquake that preceded it. We have to go back to 2022 and talk about Barbarian, the film that pushed Zach Cregger's name to the forefront and became one of the biggest surprise horror hits in years. This movie was like a phenomenon, a word-of-mouth sensation that proved audiences were desperate for something that defied their expectations. Here's the elevator pitch. For those of you who somehow missed it, a young woman named Tess arrives late at night to her Airbnb in a rundown Detroit neighborhood, only to find it's been double booked by a man named Keith. With a storm raging and no other options, she reluctantly agrees to stay. What follows is a masterclass in slow burn tension, a claustrophobic two-hander that preys on every real-world fear a woman in that situation would have. Is this guy a threat? Is he just awkward? Can she trust him? And then Tess discovers a hidden door in the basement, and the film you thought you were watching completely implodes. You see that it's something that Cregger is obsessed with, because the single most brilliant and ballsy thing about Barbarian is its structure. The film is built in 3 distinct, jarringly different acts that feel like they were stitched together by a madman. The first act is a pure nail-biting thriller. Cregger focuses entirely on the uneasy dynamic between Tess and Keith, using Bill Skarsgård, the man who played Pennywise, as the ultimate red herring. You're so busy trying to figure out if he's the real monster that you completely miss the real danger lurking in the architecture of the house itself. Then after a moment of shocking, brutal violence, the film slams on the brakes and yanks you out of the story completely. Cut to a sun-drenched California highway. The music is upbeat. Justin Long, playing a scumbag Hollywood actor named AJ, is singing along to his radio in his convertible. It's a massive, jarring tonal shift into pitch black absurdist comedy. Audiences in theaters didn't know what to do. People were laughing. stumbling, they were grasping, they were utterly confused. And just when you start to get your bearings, Cregger does it again, throwing us into a grainy 4:3 aspect ratio flashback to the 1980s, revealing the house's twisted origin story. This protagonist shifting genre-bending approach was so unconventional that it almost got the film killed. Studio executives just didn't get it. They read the script and saw something broken, something that didn't fit into their neat little marketing boxes. But that's precisely why it works. The film's chaotic, unpredictable structure mirrors the experience of its characters. You, the viewer, are just as lost and disoriented as Tess is in those dark subterranean tunnels. You never know what's coming next, and that sense of profound uncertainty is more terrifying than any jump scare. The idea of the film actually came to Cregger after he read a self-help book called The Gift of Fear, which advised women to pay attention to the subtle red flags men often give off in social situations. He became obsessed with this idea and wrote a 30-page scene where he tried to cram in every single microaggression and unsettling behavior he could imagine a man exhibiting. That scene became the entire first act of Barbarian. It's a film that's fundamentally rooted in the all-too-real horror of gender dynamics and the constant low-level threat assessment that women are forced to perform every single day. And this theme of deep-seated social misogyny is baked into the very foundation of the movie. The house on the Barber Street is a metaphor. It's a monument to generations of male violence, a place where the exploitation and abuse of women has been literally buried, hidden away beneath the floorboards. The film taps into this primal fear that beneath every inviting, seemingly safe surface, a hidden brutality lurks. The characters are perfect embodiments of this theme. Keith, the initial housemate, tries so hard to be the good guy, the progressive feminist ally, but his objectively correct behavior only amplifies the tension. We as an audience are trained by genre tropes. We're conditioned to expect that his politeness is a mask. Then you have AJ, the narcissistic actor facing a Me Too scandal. He is a self-pitying, self-centered piece of shit who represents the modern face of toxic masculinity. His complete inability to see his own wrongdoing, his desperate attempts to absolve himself, and his ultimate willingness to sacrifice Tess to save his own skin prove that he's just a contemporary version of the house's original monster, Frank. He's the legacy of misogyny repacked for the 21st century. And this all culminates in the character of the mother, the grotesque and tragic result of decades of incestuous abuse. She is the physical manifestation of all the violence that is soaked into the walls of that house. She is the revenge of the feminine, a figure of both horror and pathos. The moment she gouges out AJ's eyes is one of the most brutally cathartic scenes in horror. It's a visceral, symbolic act of retribution against the man who embodies the very evil that created her. Cregger masterfully layers this social commentary with a critique of urban decay and systemic neglect. The film is set in a dilapidated Detroit neighborhood, a ghost town of abandoned houses and broken infrastructure. This setting symbolizes a society that has allowed violence and abuse to fester for decades by simply looking the other way. The fact that the police completely disregard Tess's frantic calls for help, dismissing her as a junkie, is a damning indictment of a system that has so often failed to protect the vulnerable. But what elevates Barbarian from just being a grim social satire is Cregger's incredible ability to blend this bone-chilling horror with laugh-out-loud macabre humor. The tonal whiplash I mentioned earlier is a feature. It's designed to keep you on high alert. The most iconic example of this scene is the scene where AJ, having just discovered the horrifying secret in the basement, immediately whips out a measuring tape to calculate the extra square footage he can add to his property listing. It's a moment of such profound narcissism and greed in the face of absolute terror that you can't help but laugh. It's this unique blend of tones, fun, terrifying, and deeply disturbing all at once. That makes the film so unforgettable. Upon its release, Barbarian became a word-of-mouth juggernaut. It was the film everyone was talking about, the one you had to see with a crowd just to experience the collective shock and laughter. It puts so many other lazy, formulaic horror movies to shame by offering something thoughtful, creepy, and genuinely surprising. It wasn't torture porn, and it wasn't another generic haunting. It was smart, it was audacious, and it proved without a shadow of a doubt that Zach Cregger wasn't a fluke. This was the work of a vital cinematic voice, a filmmaker who understands that the best horror says something, and with Barbarian, he was screaming it from the rooftops. So, who is the guy behind these two meticulously crafted cinematic nightmares? Who is this filmmaker that came out of nowhere and started dropping genre-bending bombs on an unsuspecting Hollywood? To understand Zach Cregger's authorial voice, you have to look at where he came from, and where he came from was comedy. For over 2 decades, Cregger was best known as a founding member of the legendary troupe The Whitest Kids You Know. Alongside his creative partner, the late Trevor Moore, he built a career on subverting expectations and finding the humor in the darkest corners of the human psyche. Their comedy was smart, it was provocative, and it was often deeply, deeply weird. It was the perfect training ground for a future horror auteur, even if no one, probably not even Cregger himself, knew it at the time. Now, a lot of people call Barbarian his directorial debut, but that's not exactly true. About a decade ago, he co-directed a movie called Miss March, an absolute train wreck of a comedy that was a colossal, gigantic flop. It was the kind of failure that could have easily ended a director's career before it even started. But instead of fading into obscurity, Cregger went away, regrouped, and came back with a completely different kind of weapon in his arsenal. His pivot to horror was forged in personal tragedy. In 2021, his best friend and creative soulmate, Trevor Moore, died unexpectedly. The grief was all-consuming, and as a way to process it, to constructively engage with his own pain, he started writing. That script became Weapons. He was channeling his own journey through the hell of loss, the confusion, the anger, the search for meaning in the meaningless, into a story. Film also informed by his own battles with addiction. Cregger, now a decade sober, grew up with an alcoholic father, and that first-hand experience with the parasitic nature of dependency bleeds into the film's terrifying metaphors. We can even say that it's a man exercising his own demons on screen, and in doing so, he inadvertently placed himself on a trajectory that Hollywood has become obsessed with, the Jordan Peele path. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Both Cregger and Peele cut their teeth in the world of sketch comedy, mastering the arts of timing, misdirection, and audience manipulation. Both made the leap to horror with debut films that were not only terrifying, but also razor-sharp social critiques. And both proved that comedy and horror are two sides of the same coin. They both rely on a setup and a punchline. In comedy, the punchline is a laugh. In horror, it's a scream. The most gifted comedians, it turns out, have a real knack for the macabre. This parallel is exactly why the bidding war for Weapons was so ferocious. Every studio was desperate to find and lock down the next Jordan Peele. They saw in Cregger a filmmaker who could deliver that same potent, highly sought-after combination of auteur-driven vision and massive box office appeal. Cregger himself has cited Get Out as a personal favorite and a major inspiration for his own journey into the genre. So, in a moment of beautiful, delicious irony, the ultimate seal of approval for his script came from Peele himself. His apoplectic reaction to losing the rights to Weapons was the clearest possible signal to the industry. This was the horror script. So this shared background in comedy is the key to understanding Cregger's unique authorial voice. His films are built on a foundation of subversion. He knows what you expect from a horror movie, and he uses that knowledge against you at every turn. Look at the structure of his films. He's a master of the protagonist shifting POV, a narrative sleight of hand that constantly pulls the rug out from under the audience. Barbarian was a brutal 3-act shock. Weapons takes that concept and refines it into a complex Magnolia-esque tapestry of 6 interwoven perspectives. It's a confident as hell evolution of his style. He's also a master of tonal gymnastics. His films pivot on a dime from moments of unbearable, heart-pounding suspense to scenes of absurd, jet-black humor. This isn't just for shock value. The comedy makes the horror hit harder. It gives the audience a moment to breathe, to lower their guard right before he goes for the jugular. It's a delicate balancing act that most filmmakers wouldn't even dare to attempt, but for Cregger, it seems to be second nature. But perhaps the most important element of his voice is his approach to social commentary. In an era where so many films feel like they're delivering a heavy-handed, preachy lecture, Cregger's work is refreshingly subtle. He doesn't have his characters stand around and deliver speeches about toxic masculinity or the failures of the American response to gun violence. Instead, he embeds his message into the very fabric of the film, into the visual language, the character actions, and the subtext. He trusts his audience to be smart enough to connect the dots. In Barbarian, the commentary on gender dynamics and urban decay is woven into the architecture of the house and the deeply flawed psyches of its male characters. In Weapons, the critique of sensationalism and the trauma of addiction is personified by a literal parasitic monster. He's a filmmaker who isn't afraid to confront uncomfortable truths, but he never forgets that his primary job is to tell a gripping, entertaining story. He successfully walks the tightrope between genre thrills and intellectual depth, creating films that work on multiple levels. You can watch them as pure white-knuckle horror experiences, or you can peel back the layers and find a rich, nuanced commentary on the anxieties of our time. With Weapons, Weapons, Cregger has definitively proven that he is not a one-hit wonder. He has successfully dodged the sophomore slump and delivered a film that is even more ambitious and thematically complex than his debut. He has established himself as a vital cinematic voice, a filmmaker whose name now carries the promise of something inventive, challenging, and utterly unforgettable. In a Hollywood landscape dominated by safe, predictable products, Zach Cregger is a glorious, terrifying agent of chaos, and we are all better for it. So after delivering two back-to-back genre-shattering horror hits, what's next for Zach Cregger? In a town that worships momentum, he is currently the hottest commodity in Hollywood. He's no longer the underdog comedy guy who got lucky once. He's a proven auteur, a filmmaker with a distinct, bankable voice. And the industry is lining up to throw money at whatever he wants to do next. The industry buzz around him is deafening. He's reportedly been tapped to helm a new Resident Evil film, which, let's be honest, is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, the idea of Cregger bringing his unique, subversive style to a major, established horror IP is incredibly exciting. On the other hand, he's already stated that he has no intention of following the plots or characters from the games, a comment that has understandably sent a tremor of anxiety through the hardcore fan base. Can a filmmaker known for his radical originality thrive within the confines of a pre-existing universe? It's a massive gamble, but if anyone can pull it off, it's probably him. Then there's the project that has every comic book nerd in a state of high alert, his Batman script. The rumor mill has been churning for a while now that Cregger has penned a script focused not on the Dark Knight himself, but on one of his low-level henchmen. It's a brilliant ground-level concept that sounds like it's ripped straight from his playbook, taking a familiar world and showing it to us from a completely new, unexpected, and probably deeply messed up perspective. With the industry already whispering that he'll be working with DC in the very near future, this could be the project that launches him into the stratosphere of blockbuster filmmaking. And of course, the world he's already built isn't finished with him yet. There's talk of a potential prequel centered on the parasitic entity Gladys from Weapons. That character was originally meant to have its own dedicated chapter within the film, so it's clear there's a much deeper mythology there just waiting to be explored. Whether that happens or not, the message is clear. Cregger is now in the franchise building business, whether he intended to be or not. But the most telling sign of his future clout comes back to the now legendary bidding war for Weapons. When the dust settled, New Line Cinema won the rights not just by offering the most money, in fact, Netflix reportedly offered more, but by guaranteeing the film a full exclusive theatrical release. This was a critical point for Cregger, who had spent years fighting unsuccessfully to get Barbarian a proper Blu-ray release. It shows that he's a filmmaker who believes in the sanctity of the cinematic experience, and he now has the power to demand it. He's playing the long game, building a legacy on the big screen, not just creating disposable content for a streaming algorithm. His meteoric rise has firmly placed him in the top tier of modern genre filmmakers, a new wave of horror auteurs who are making the genre not just culturally relevant again, but incredibly profitable. The constant comparisons to Jordan Peele are more than just surface-level observations about their shared comedy roots. They represent a fundamental shift in what Hollywood values. Studios now see that the most potent horror comes from a place of sharp satirical intelligence. They see that the skills required to craft a perfect sketch, timing, subversion, and understanding of audience psychology, are the exact same skills required to craft a perfect scare. Cregger has become a vital cinematic voice because he offers the best of both worlds. He has the narrative complexity of a Paul Thomas Anderson, the bone-chilling suspense of a Denis Villeneuve, and the absurdist dark humor of the Coen brothers, all wrapped up in a package that can sell tickets. He's earning praise from filmmaking legends like David Fincher, who was reportedly giving him notes and advice during the making of Weapons, helping him elevate the film to another level. When a master of the craft like Fincher takes you under his wing, you know you're doing something right. He's an artist who balances his ambitious auteur vision with a genuine understanding of what makes a movie thrilling and accessible. His films put most other modern horror to shame precisely because they refuse to be just one thing. They are thoughtful, atmospheric, and deeply metaphorical, but they never forget to be entertaining. They are the antithesis of the lazy, jump scare-laden schlock that has given the genre a bad name for so long. What Cregger's future represents is hope. Hope for a Hollywood that is increasingly risk-averse and creatively stagnant. He is living proof that originality is not dead. He's proof that a filmmaker can tackle complex, uncomfortable themes about our society and still pack theaters. He's proof that you don't need a 9-figure budget or a globally recognized IP to make a cultural impact. All you need is a singular, uncompromising vision and the guts to see it through. As he moves into this next phase of his career, the expectations will be astronomical. Every project will be scrutinized, every creative choice analyzed. But if his track record has shown us anything, it's that Zach Cregger thrives under pressure. He's a filmmaker who isn't interested in playing it safe or giving the audience what they think they want. He's interested in challenging them, in surprising them, and in dragging them kicking and screaming into the darkest, most unexpected corners of his imagination. And for an industry that is starving for new ideas, that makes him an exciting director to watch, an absolutely essential one. The future of mainstream horror may very well rest on his shoulders, and honestly, I can't think of a safer or more terrifying pair of hands to put it in. So, to bring this all home, let's go back to where we started. A Hollywood in freefall. An industry choked by its own creative cowardice, pumping out an endless stream of soulless, formulaic content that nobody asked for and nobody will remember in 6 months or less. It's an empire in decline, obsessed with chasing the ghosts of its past successes while completely ignoring the vibrant, vital, and terrifyingly brilliant future that's staring it right in the face. Because as we've seen, while the rest of the industry has been busy falling apart, the horror genre has been quietly, methodically staging a revolution. It has evolved from the cheap thrills of the slasher era and the grim nihilism of torture porn into the single most dynamic and essential genre in modern cinema. This is about holding a dark, distorted mirror up to the anxieties of our time. And right now, there is no one holding that mirror with a steadier, more unflinching hand than Zach Cregger. Cregger's films are important. They are bone-deep examinations of the rot festering just beneath the pristine surface of our society. Barbarian was about the legacy of misogyny and systemic neglect ingrained in the very architecture of our world. It was a searing commentary on the Me Too movement, on gentrification, and on the terrifying power imbalances that exist between men and women. And Weapons is even more ambitious. It's a profound, deeply personal meditation on grief and addiction, wrapped in a blistering critique of our culture's toxic, sensationalized response to tragedy. It's a film that bravely confronts the uniquely American horror of gun violence, not with a preachy sermon, but with haunting, unforgettable imagery. These are films that want to make you think. They want to make you uncomfortable. They get under your skin and stay there long after the credits have rolled because they are about the real fears that keep us up at night. He is part of a new vanguard of filmmakers, alongside visionaries like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, who are proving that horror can be art. But what makes Cregger uniquely powerful, what makes him a potential game changer for the entire industry, is his uncanny ability to weld that artistic ambition to mainstream commercial appeal. His films are complex, multi-layered narrative puzzles, but they are never alienating. They are filled with a devilish, absurdist sense of humor that makes the moments of terror feel even more potent. He creates inventive, high-concept thrills that feel both deeply personal and universally accessible. This is why audiences show up. This is why his films become word-of-mouth sensations. In an age of endless content, he is creating unforgettable cinematic experiences. He respects his audience enough to challenge them, to play with their expectations, and to trust them to follow him down the darkest, most twisted narrative rabbit holes. So that's my take, but I want to know what you guys think. What is your favorite modern horror film? Is there another director out there who you think is pushing the genre forward? Let me know down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this. And most importantly, take care.